So I wanted to welcome Aleksandar Zafirovski from Northwestern Medicine to Fortress, making the brand. And we've gotten to know each other over the past couple of years in launching Breast Cancer Patient Connect and in our effort to build a platform for breast cancer survivors and patients. And it's been great to work with you and get to know you on that. Can you give us a little bit of history on you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you again for the invite here to this, wonderful space. And it's so good to see people in person, after this initial and hopefully soon to end, pandemic.
Yeah.
But it's been truly a pleasure, to work with you and your team on this project together. And when you say, personal story, it's interesting. Some people grow up and some I mentor now, and they wonder kind of what they want to do with their lives, and
Right.
for me, and not necessarily due to a positive outcome, but it's sort of been predetermined. My father died from cancer when I was 11 years old, and then later on, I lost my mother as well to cancer.
Wow.
Different type, but the silver lining, if you want to say, it's sort of a terrible way to put it, but there wasn't really anything else that I would ever want to do, So
Right.
in that sense, it was clear for me from the beginning. I started working at Northwestern in 2001 as a radiation therapist, so basically taking care of patients. And then over time, I, in a way, sold out and went back to administration, got my MBA, and now I'm the chief administrative officer of our, Lurie Cancer Center at Northwestern. And it's really been remarkable, to see what we have been able to accomplish in serving this community, of Chicagoland, and now with all these different locations throughout the region, north, west, northwest, etc. Really is making a big impact in people's lives and all of our, family. We're all in a big, giant community. So I really appreciate connecting with you and your team because I do think that not only have we done some great things, but I think we have some more projects ahead that I think we can really leverage one another's expertise.
So I didn't know that about your background. That's incredible of how you were able to kind of channel that, I think, into being able to help people. So what's a story for you in your current role or in your professional history of like where you got to really say like, wow, I made an impact on that person or were able to really help them?
Yeah, I think it's nice to, sort of self-reflect and see these things. And at some point you just realize you sort of become the old guy. And whereas you sort of internally still feel like, you're continuously learning and you need other people to sort of advise and mentor you, you start to see, if you want to say, some of the emerging, leaders coming. And I think the impact shifts over time. So initially, when I started working as a clinician, you really could get immediate feedback from the patients because every day you would see 30 or 40 people that would be in your hands literally. And then when they left the clinic, they would say, thank you so much, Alex. They bring you cookies, they sort of bring their families. You really get to see, again, not everybody, unfortunately, obviously does well, but you were still there helping them along, And I think when you move into more of a if you want to say higher leadership role, I don't know if that's the right term, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Then you sort of have to make sure that you get a team that actually can serve that on your behalf. And at least maybe this is how I rationalize it to myself, because before I can only impact 30, 40 people a day. Now through the team, we're impacting hundreds and thousands of people. And there's also an impact on young professionals. They're entering, the field of either clinical care or scientific research, because again, we have to still do more work. More people are surviving today from cancer than ever before, but it's still not to the point where it's treated like cholesterol or blood pressure. And we got to at least get it to that point. So a lot of times, I'll just give one most recent example. I had an intern over summer who was actually going to Boston College and just wanted to learn a bit more about oncology and research. And we put him in different areas, and I talked to him, gave him some papers, and took him out for lunch a few times. And it was only there, I think, 6 weeks. At the end, he gave me this thank you card, and he said, I never even understood what this field is about in cancer research, but it's like, now I think this is what I'm going to focus on when I get to college. Again, it's a freshman kid. Yeah. Hopefully things work, but super bright. So sometimes you don't know that extra coffee or that 1 hour is going to end up changing somebody's life for the better. So I think it's important to continue to do that. And people have done that for me, so I try to pay it forward.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for me, similar wiring of just a lot of fulfillment in just coaching and leading and mentoring. And like, for me, it's strange to even think of myself in that seat. And like you said, like all of a sudden you look and like you're the older guy. And, for me, I'm always like just like pulling on older, wiser guys' coattails and just like spend 5 minutes with me and let me pick your brain.
Yeah.
How do you feel like the pandemic has impacted what you do, but also in how people in the breast cancer space are interacting or finding community?
Yeah, and it maybe ties to, like you made a comment earlier about, how one can take something and channel it a certain way. And I kind of just choose to sort of look at all of these events in the same way. So pandemic, obviously, hopefully once in a lifetime for us, right? But it appears to be, every 100 years, and hopefully it's less or the same, but not worse. But I think initially you sort of just had to survive the thing, frankly, because in our case, we actually our receptionist within 3 weeks of pandemic had gotten COVID and has actually died.
Wow.
And obviously being in a cancer center, people are still going to work. So we talk about essential folks, and these are definitely the ones. And whether it's the pandemic, whether it was the unrest and things like this, we all we had people in ICUs, and these are real people, right? And you have to really deal with that. So whether it's the mechanics, like initially we don't have the masks, we don't have the gloves, then we can get a test, then who's going to get the vaccine first? So there's the mechanics. But I think what it's really crystallized, I hope it's going to stay, although human nature tells me maybe not to the same extent that I would like it to. But I think we all probably recognize the importance of relationships and a community, and how critical it is to have each other's back when things like this happen, because some problems cannot be solved simply by you just trying a little harder or you working a little faster. And I always found that to be sort of interesting, and working with cancer patients, it doesn't take you a long time to get perspective, right? Like I sit there and I say, oh, the Wi-Fi is slow. Oh, I can't believe this thing is not working the right way. And then all we have to do is just walk across the bridge and you see a little kid in a wheelchair that's bald going through leukemia treatment. So there's real problems, and then there's problems, right? So things like pandemic, where it's life or death, and I think I'm hoping that gives people a bit, and I do think, I have to be optimistic, and I am. And I do think, especially this newer generation that I see coming up, is really using this as a purpose. I think you see some of that short-term negatively impacted. It's hard to get people. It's hard to recruit good talent, because people are looking at what's really important in life. And I think that is fundamentally over time good. Short-term, we may have to make some changes, but I do think the pandemic, when it's all said and done, despite tremendous cost. We're talking very abstractly here. There's millions of people lost their lives, of course. And so many children without parents, and so many, kids without grandparents. Clearly that cannot, I know you get that. But I do think that there will be some positive learnings, and hopefully we as a global society, can move forward in a better way.
Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of things there. I think for us too, just as Fortress as a business, it was just short-term pain, but then longer term, just major gains of clients that have come out of the woodwork that are like, hey, this is our opportunity to put ourselves on the map and grow. And even our team, the way that we kind of came together just through unrest and through, the pandemic and lockdowns and things like that. So you talked about mistrust or information. And so for me, my sister's a infectious disease doctor, so I pick her brain on a lot of stuff. My brother-in-law is a healthcare attorney, so they're kind of my sounding boards. My wife's a biology teacher, so they're all the professionals I go to for advice. But I feel like there's never been a time where there's been like more mistrust of the scientific community. So is that something that you've always had and it's just now coming to light, or is it higher than ever in society?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're definitely asking the right question, and obviously sounds like you have some of the most amazing sort of folks to fall back on to decipher through the mess, if you want to say. And the reason I say mess, science is messy. By nature, things are not black and white.
Right.
You are discovering things that have never been known before.
Right.
And I think this is one thing that if you're not in the field, so to speak, and you also do not want to be educated on the process of it, I think I can see how it can be confusing. So, for example, I have a cousin of mine that tells me, well, look, this uncle of ours has been smoking cigarettes since he was 11 years old. He's 80, doesn't have lung cancer.
Right.
And I keep telling him, like, well, they both can be true, meaning good. I hope he doesn't. But that does not mean that smoking does not cause lung cancer, right? And that's the nuance. And I think what we have missed here is that the things that science goes through really require a deep understanding of the process. And it is impossible to put this in, on Twitter.
Yeah.
And it is impossible to put this in a tidbit. So there are trusted resources, there are information. And I think what you see, if you want to say globally, has to do with a level of trust.
Right.
Because if you do not have trust, I think I read early on in pandemic, somebody said the best tool for us to overcome the pandemic was trust.
Right.
And it really kind of surprised me to the point thinking, well, I would think vaccine or maybe some medicine. But fundamentally, it's true. If you cannot trust the source. So this is where I think it is an interesting question, though, because there are multiple factors for this. I mean, you can blame everybody, I'm sure. But I think this is going to be an important one for us to wrestle with, because the way we made all of these advancements, the way that people are having the lives to have is science. I mean, whether it's, the iPhone, whether it's the thing we're doing, whether it's Advil, prior, whenever it was discovered, was not Advil, right?
Right.
So people are not making the connection. Some of it is maybe on us to communicate more effectively and clearly, but there is a two-way street in a sense. Like the people also have to be informed, just like they do about every, other challenge, if you want to say, our society is facing.
Right. So do you feel like it's increasing, or it's you're essentially saying it's always been there? There's always been the skepticism of like how science works.
It probably has, and I think you sort of have I kind of feel like there's always a bell curve for all these things. So over here, on one hand, you have people that are like, yep, if my doctor told me, if my attorney, if my whomever it is, that this is good for me. Like the next iPhone comes out, you're like, I'm just going to buy the thing.
Right.
It's probably better than the other thing. You don't read, the agreements, you don't read the features. You just trust this thing is not going to explode and, I don't know, give you brain cancer or whatever. On the opposite side, I think you have people that are going to be total extreme the other way.
Right.
But I do think that these are still, relatively speaking, minorities. I think most people, frankly, don't care.
Right.
And I think for a good reason, because they have real lives to live.
The loudest.
Yeah, the ones that do are loud, right?
Yeah.
So this becomes sort of like when we get into the politics, like a single issue voter kind of thing, right?
Right.
So whatever it is, I think the people in the middle, and it's good, and we've been blessed not to care.
Right.
It's nice to have your life and not worry about is it SARS-CoV-2 or is it SARS-CoV? Like you don't want to think about this. I get it, but what happens is when you try to do complex things in a sort of soundbite, it's very difficult to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're at now, and it's amplified because we live in this like soundbite tidbit generation and world where somebody says something controversial and then it just gets shared and liked and retweeted, and then all of a sudden that is the news. So I think, for me, one thing I've done this year is just really tuned out the news. Like if it doesn't impact me immediately and I can't control it, I don't care.
I mean, Joel, you mentioned earlier, like, I'm glad you agreed that you're also the old guy. And it's funny. I definitely have more gray hair, but I think just think of like in your professional life or when staff comes to you with some sort of a issue or a challenge for you to overcome. Whenever you hear a story, you right away start forming an opinion, right? To say, okay, I think I know what happened here, right?
Right.
And I would assume that there's rarely a time that you don't then see the other side and you say, oh, wait, hold on. Like, I can see why maybe this looked that way or didn't look that way. I mean, again, there are some things that are very clear, black and white, I agree. But for the majority of the time, there is complexity.
Right.
And if you are just sort of choosing to be informed in one particular way, that's either convenient or that it maybe validates what you want to believe, I think you're just sort of shortchanging yourself and you're just not growing. Because you have to challenge yourself, I think, for some of the hard stuff. You know? And I think that it's important for all of us to kind of listen to the quote unquote other side. But it's also important to sometimes recognize that there are really facts. They're facts for a reason.
Right.
And those are different than opinions.
Yeah. And for us, I can speak to this being in the digital space and the tech space is it's all about clicks and views and screen time and time on site and engagement. And so it's like it becomes an echo chamber when you're fed more of what you want to see. But I think that's a bigger issue even than the pandemic. So in working with you for the past, I think, couple of years, one thing I've been impressed with you is I feel like you're an entrepreneurial mind within this healthcare space, which I think is rare. So it's been, I've loved it because I'm wired that way. But how do you think healthcare and marketing and branding and all of that go hand in hand? Because I know we built this platform together in Breast Cancer Patient Connect, but I think you're an outlier in the space. But how, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And you're right that we are an outlier, meaning this is the only way we could have done it. I think if you stay within the constraints of traditional healthcare, I think you sort of know what to expect. And there isn't really a lot of innovation. And in so many ways, I mean, God, when was it the airline industry would text you if the flight was running late, right? It was many, many years ago. And I don't think airline industry has the best customer service. No. But it's only recent, and certainly not uniformly does your physician office say, we're running a little late, right? As a simple example. And lots of things are on paper still. They're redundant. And so we have a lot of challenges in healthcare that I think are, not adding value, and there are multiple issues, regulatory, et cetera. But fundamentally, it's also probably increasing the cost, right? So when we were, thinking about how to approach this, I pretty much knew that we can only do it if we sort of partner with somebody that comes from a different point of view. Right. And it is a constant struggle, because I sit there and I wonder, for every, let's say, dollar we invest in something that is not traditionally invested in. So if I invest $1 in scientific research, it's good. If I invest $1 in helping somebody pay for parking, it's good. It is difficult when the dollars are scarce to sort of say, how do you invest in something that potentially down the road is actually going to make an impact, but you may not see it in year 1, year 2, et cetera. So it is something that I think we do not know yet, how to embrace, other than what I would call plain which is advertising. Like there's a billboard and there's click things, and I don't know. This is your space, of course, but I think like how do you get, like you said earlier, people to like you, to look at video and things like this. But I'm not sure, like if that really can be always tied back to a meaningful engagement. I think the platform that you created for us is there to really engage the patients and their families, and not to get them there and then sell them on something. That is not at all the intent, and I don't think we have any of this capability in there in the site. Yeah.
So I feel like you and I have some level of like an immigrant story in our family history. And so what are your thoughts in the current state of the American dream? Is it very much alive? Is it in jeopardy? What are your thoughts?
That's interesting. Yeah, this is, it comes up in some form, I think in multiple ways. And like you said, you do sort of see the world through that lens, you know. And me personally, despite all the challenges, and God knows there have been many all the time, and I'm not sure if I'm just more aware now than before, but whether it's, you know, the geopolitical issues or whether it's the local, you know, issues, I mean, Chicago, the state,
Right.
the nation kind of thing, I somehow still, you know, despite all the challenges, believe that if it's gonna be possible, this is still, I think, the best place.
Right.
Maybe the dream has to be redefined, you know, maybe. And I think we need to do a lot of work to make sure it actually truly is, if you want to say, achievable and available to everybody else. Because one thing, just because it happened to you and to me, there's a risk there of you thinking,
Yeah.
and I know you don't, and I don't either. Like, I don't think I did it on my own. You know, you didn't do it on your own.
Yeah.
But others sometimes, and tell me if this is what you feel, sometimes people tell me, like, well, see, you did it. Why can somebody else do it? And man, I mean, do you have to work hard? Yes. But you got to get lucky, you know? You got to get lucky, and you are also standing on shoulders of many others. And I think that is a bit of a thing that's missing. You know, I think get a little more humble, get a little more to sort of walk a mile in the other person's shoes. And I feel like, again, I came here when I was 17, so I do not really know growing up how things were. But where I come from, it's very much so the neighborhood takes care of you. And that, I think, is maybe the thing that's missing. And I think through this pandemic, we saw some of that because, you know, you don't need 25 rolls of toilet paper, you know? And that's just one example. And I think if we can go a little bit that way, I mean, not to the point where everybody's in your business. I understand that's the tension, but too far one way or the other. All alone is too bad. Yeah. And not having accountability is not good. But there's something there in the middle that I think would help us maybe get back on track, if you want to say.
I like how you phrase that. It's the American dream is alive, but maybe needs to be redefined. And I think so too. I think it's not necessarily like buy a house, get a mortgage, 1.5 kids and a white picket fence or whatever. I think for me, it's very much alive, and it's about creating things and upward mobility and having influence and impact on people now more than ever, which I think is possible. So last question I always like to ask everybody is 100 years from now, what do you want people to remember about Alex Zafirovski?
Yeah, I think it's a good exercise to like write your obituary, right? I think when I was going to for my MBA at Notre Dame, which I think is a bit, you know, how do I say? I don't want to say fluffy, but I mean, you know, you go through a bit of a watching Rudy on, you know, on sort of repeat. But you know, you have a finance class, and there's like, you know, Jesus hanging over the thing, and you know, not even being Catholic, it gives you a different perspective. But the reason I bring it up, we actually had courses about self-reflection and how can you ask more of business. I think that might have been a tagline. I'm not sure if it was like a marketing ploy or what they actually, you know, weaved into all the courses. But I think that's what I keep thinking is what is the impact and the legacy you want to leave behind. And I do think it's fundamentally simple. And I forget who I'm quoting here. I'm probably not quoting them correctly, but who said, you know, people are going to not remember what you did, but they're going to remember how you treated them or
how you made them feel.
How you made them feel. And there's a version of, you know, nobody cares until they see, nobody's going to listen to you until they see how much you care. Again, I'm butchering these quotes, but I think fundamentally that's what it is. I think the whole thing is about relationships, and you have to recognize that and choose that path. And you win some, you lose some, you know, but you really, I think, should be mindful of that, because I think some of these things catch up. And flip side of that is it's given back to you in so many ways. I mean, I think, like I mentioned earlier, I invest an hour, it returns back 10. You know, I think that I've never been disappointed in, you know, call it karma, and I'm not sure what term to use, but I think it works. There's something when you give, it comes back to you.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Awesome. So thanks so much for spending some time with us. And I like what you said about investing the hour and having it have maybe a tenfold impact on people. So thank you for spending an hour with us, and love the wisdom and insight that I got.
Thank you, Charles. It's a pleasure.